Welcome to People. I'm Micah Mateer. Let's get started. Black-owned banks say they've seen a surge in account activity. Politics and social media movements are getting the credit for that boost. But what can be done to keep business booming? Well, we're joined by representatives from two of Chicago's black-owned financial institutions. Daryl Newell, Chief Retail Banking Officer at Seaway Bank and Trust Company. Monica Thomas, Executive Vice President of Illinois Service Federal Savings and Loan. And Sandra Finley, an economic development advocate and President and CEO of the League of Black Women. Thank you all for coming. You know, we talk about black-owned banks. Why don't we hear much about black-owned banks? Why do we just hear about the big ones, the Chases and the Fifth Third banks? Why don't we hear a lot about black-owned banks?
Well, I think it depends on your perspective. You know, if you're a community advocate, then you know all about Illinois Service Federal and, of course, Seaway Bank. And so those individuals who have their ear to the ground, so to speak, are aware of our rich traditions and history of providing credit to the folks in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about the community. I mean, you guys, ISF has been around for 80 years. What would the black community do without banks like Seaway and ISF?
So I think one of the things that happens is that the community, we realize that the communities are only as strong as the business and the financial community is strong. And what would happen if we didn't have them is that the credit access, the stability, our property values, our neighborhoods, our education system, they would not be as strong if our business community isn't strong. And I think one of the answers to the question you had about why you don't hear about us as much as Chase and some of these larger regional banks, and not just Chase, but larger regional ones, is that banks of our size and the nature and the engagement that we have with our community residents, it ends up being a lot of word of mouth. So you're right, there's a lot of community involvement, community engagement, but we just don't have the advertising dollars that a large regional bank would have. And so we depend on our customers and the business community to promote us as well.
So Sandra, it's a big role that these banks are playing then in the community.
It is. It's anchoring everything that is our potential economic connection to our possibilities is anchored by these banks. And when you talked there a little bit earlier about the contrast between these banks, our community banks, and the big banks, you have to also focus on huge multinational businesses that are right here in Chicago, which do not have money on deposit at our banks. These businesses take our money as we are individuals who consume and spend and do what we need to do, but they don't pay back by putting the money here. For instance, a great company like McDonald's is highly likely that you do have McDonald's accounts, but those are likely to be owner-operators instead of the big corporate bank. You know, where's Boeing's money? And where are some of the others as well?
Do banks like yours want to have that corporate money, or are you happy and thriving with the community money?
Well, we always like to have corporate money. Certainly the dollars that come from those treasury operations certainly help us to do the loans that the community is looking for us to do, which in turn also builds the amenities that you need in the community, places homeowners, folks in homes, allows the small businesses to gain access to credit. So all deposits are good deposits for community banks.
When we talk about loans, you know, a few years back, everything tanked, the home loans and everything tanked. Did that affect you guys, or does that only affect the big guys?
So what I would say is that an economic crisis and a housing crisis affects all of us. And it probably and certainly affects community banks, and particularly minority banks. It hits us even harder because the losses, the credit access, that diminishes much more quickly, and the impact of that is much more significant. And so while some of the larger banks can take some of these losses, write them off, toss them off, and keep moving, and just, you know, it's just a business expense, it's an impact to our institutions, and it's an impact to the property values and our neighbors, and those are the people who are our borrowers.
Right. Now, South Shore Bank, for instance, that was one that kind of dwindled, and it was a pillar in the community at one time, too. How do you keep this from happening to these small banks like this?
Well, from our point of view, that is the community.
Yeah.
And what we do is we sit down with our bankers and we ask the questions that need to be asked ahead of time. You see, these bankers are not interested only in selling you instruments and selling you loans. They are interested in your long-term viability because it's tied to theirs.
Is it more personal, you think?
It has to be because, again, we are tied to one another. If you make a loan and it doesn't go well, they feel it immediately.
Right.
They don't have someplace else to shift
Right.
it. And so
Right.
they're likely to give you the best counsel, and here's the best way to approach what it is that you're trying to do.
How important is social media now for you guys? Have you seen a boost because of it?
Certainly, social media is very important. We've seen a dramatic boost. We've opened up over 800 accounts and
Really?
$3 million since July the 1st. And we're looking forward to opening more on August the 31st when we have a community banking day.
What about some of the violence in the community? Does that affect you guys? How does that affect you?
So I think that there's no business in our community that lives in a vacuum. And so everything that affects our community residents and our business, it's going to affect us as well. And so it's interesting. Today I was talking to a young lady, and what I said is that the violence has become so prevalent in our communities that pretty soon we're going to find that there's not one person who hasn't been touched by it in some way.
And we know your bank, for instance, was touched by
That's
it.
right.
Not long ago.
We were yes, we were touched by it. Additionally, we all remember the young man, Thomas Wortham. He lived right down the street
Police
from
officer.
from one of our branches, and so you feel that. And what you do is, like any other thing, like families, you pull the covers
Right.
up, and you try to move forward, and you
Exactly.
try as best you can in our business and in our engagement to make sure that we have stable services. And so, social services are very important, but you have to have dollars to be able to support those social services. And that's the type of stability that community banks offer.
Thank you all three for coming in. So much more to talk
Thank
about
you.
this. We'll have to have you back.